Hello and welcome to Sultai Sword, featuring Tireless Tracker. Now, I was playing a lot with the blue-black Urza lists that Eli Cassis was playing and created, I believe. I believe I'm trying to give credit to the correct person. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong there. And I liked the deck. My first thing I did was I ran it through a league. It didn't go well. Then I added Emery, and the deck felt much smoother. And since then, Ellie's actually added Emery to his own list, so I felt a little justified there. I was like, yeah, I felt like what the deck was missing was Emery a little bit, at least for my play style, what I personally enjoy. Then I saw a list which featured no Thopters. It was a Sultai control list featuring 4 trackers, 4 Urza. It's on the 5.0 dump, and it's like AAOO, AAOO, I think is the MTGO username. That deck looked really cool. It used Metallic Rebuke or the improvised Mana Leak with Tireless Tracker. So what you could do is you could do Goose turn 1, turn 2, play a Tireless Tracker, turn 3, or turn 2 something, turn 3, Tireless Tracker, play a fetch land, get 2 clues, get an island up, and now you can cast Mana Leak because you can tap your 2 clues and tap your blue. It was just a really, really cool idea. And that deck didn't run Thopter Foundry. And my first thought was, looking at that list, was the Thopter combo is kind of free here, right? And I think Thoughtseize is at an all-time premium right now. All-time really, really good, which I'll get to in a minute. But the actual Thopter combo, in and of itself, it's a six slots. You know, it is 10% of your deck, but it's 6 really good slots. Sword of the Meek sucks, but Thopter Foundry by itself, when you're already running Astrolabe and Baubles, just feels really good. Late game, just being able to turn stuff into chump blockers or being able to threaten planeswalkers. People have been terrified about Sword of the Meek, so they've been like actively exiling it. I'm like, okay, you know, because I still have Thopter Foundry, and Thopter Foundry is the actual threat there. Now, I did win a game equipping like an Urza or a Construct with Sword of the Meek to deal 1 more damage than normal, but Sword of the Meek is terrible. It's there because it combos with Thopter Foundry. So this in and of itself is a pretty powerful little engine, especially since it combos for Infinite with Urza. For those unfamiliar, Thopter Foundry, how do I zoom? Thopter Foundry, you get to sacrifice a non-token artifact, make a 1/1 Thopter, gain a life. Sword of the Meek, if you have Sword of the Meek in your graveyard, you can return it to the battlefield whenever a 1/1 enters the battlefield under your control, and then you equip it to that creature. Sword of the Meek's an equipment that gives +1/+2, which is still relevant. The +2 seems more important than the +1, but... So what we have here is we can use Thopter Foundry to sacrifice Sword of the Meek, pay 1 mana, get a Thopter, gain a life. For every 1 mana we have, when we have those 2 assembled, we gain 1 mana, one life, and a 1/1 Thopter, which has flying. If we add Urza to the mix, Urza has its ability tap an artifact you control to add blue. So now we can tap the Sword of the Meek to feed itself, so we have infinite Thopters. We gain infinite life, infinite Thopters. We also, since we have infinite Thopters, we also can tap those for mana, and now we have infinite mana, which we can use to pay this extra ability. Pay 5, shuffle your library, exile a top card. You can play that card for free this turn. So what this does is once we have those 3 assembled, we kind of just win the game. Now, our opponent can try to stop us. We can just shuffle and flip in response until we get to a Cryptic Command, a Deprives, Archmage's Charm, something to stop our opponent, some sort of counterspell to stop them, and while we just accrue a large enough board to kill them. So I feel like that part's free. So when I was looking at the Sultai list of Tracker, I realized Tracker is better than Emery. Now, this may come as shocking. I love Tireless Tracker, and the Tireless Tracker is great. Tracker is better than Emery for a few reasons. 1, Tireless Tracker does not use a graveyard. Post-board, I was looking for threats that didn't use the graveyard. I love doing that in decks that use the graveyard. I've done it a lot with Abzan Traverse, my old Sultai decks. I mean, for those who are unaware, I have a pretty big history with jamming these particular colors with Tarmogoyfs and Grim Flayers and Dark Confidants and Liliana the Veils. And the card that I was always missing was like, I feel like Sultai always needed a 4-drop that was powerful. 4-drop that did something good. And here we have it with Urza. So Tireless Tracker, as I was saying, is better than Emery because Tireless Tracker does not use the graveyard. Every other one of my threats here, all these here, Thopter Foundry combo, and Mystic Sanctuary all use the graveyard. So opponents sometimes bring an extra graveyard hit against me. Tireless Tracker doesn't use the graveyard and it's a threat by itself. Tireless Tracker makes artifact tokens, which is something that Oko did for Urza as well. Every land I drop, or every fetch land makes 2, but every land I drop makes a clue. I run 10 fetch lands in this deck, which is quite a bit, so I'm already pretty good for Tracker. Now, if I have Tracker in play, a Mystic Sanctuary either in hand or I have a fetch, and then Cryptic or Deprive. So that's a 3-card process: Tracker, Mystic Sanctuary, and then a counter spell that returns a land to my hand. I can make the infinite counter lock. What I can do here is, Emery does the same thing if you keep rebuying a Mishra's Bauble, but Tracker just does it by itself. So Tracker, you have Tracker in play, you cast Cryptic Command or Deprive. Deprive's less mana intensive, so I cast Deprive on my opponent's spell, picking up Mystic Sanctuary. On my turn, I replay Mystic Sanctuary, get a clue. Mystic Sanctuary targets Deprive, puts Deprive on top of the deck. I crack the clue, draw Deprive. I can do that every turn, and it only costs me 4 mana. In this time, I'm making Tireless Tracker +1/+1. Every turn, my threat's getting bigger and bigger, and I get to counter my opponent's spell every single turn. Obviously, it's really good in top deck mode. Also works with Cryptic Command, just costs 2 more mana to do so. When I realized that, I was like, Tireless Tracker is just absolutely phenomenal in an Urza deck. Clues, by the way, which really pushed me over the top in brewing this deck. Clues do not have to tap when you sacrifice them. So if you have Tireless Tracker, Urza, and a fetch land, you play the fetch land, get 2 clues. You have 2 clues in play, you can use Urza to tap them both for mana, and then you can use that 2 mana to crack one of those clues. It's just, you're making moxes that cycle. It is absolutely unbelievable how powerful that effect is. So I'll go over the entire list. I think 23 lands is correct. This deck wants a lot of mana. Mystic Sanctuary is really powerful too, so even late game, like top decking a fetch land is not a bad thing. Top decking Island still sucks, but top decking a fetch land is really powerful. As I said, I'm running a bunch of fetch lands. You can see I have 10 just to try to hit my color requirements while also hitting as many future Mystic Sanctuaries as possible. I'm running 3 black sources, 1 basic Swamp, which I can fetch off the Delta, Watery Grave, which any fetch line can get, and Sunken Hollow, which again, any fetch line can get. Sunken Hollow is pretty good in games where I'm going basic island heavy in the beginning. It's really good against aggro. It's not as good when I really need that in my hand, was like Mystic Sanctuary, Breeding Pool, fetch. I'm like, well, I have to shock here no matter what. So Sunken Hollow is not as good in those situations. But I think it's still really good just to help you in the bad aggro matchups. Bad just being burn, really. So I do run a ton of basic lands, which is necessary to make Astrolabe work. Now I just want to pause real quick, and I was originally running a basic forest. I was originally running Goose in the lists. But I didn't like Goose because Goose required the basic forest. Goose required a lot more work to manage the mana. And Goose, which does make tokens on her own, or its own, artifact tokens, which is pretty good. But what it didn't do was it didn't double mana me. So I couldn't go turn 1 Goose, turn 2 Tracker, or like post board my goal was to go turn 2 Ashiok against big mana. So I couldn't do like turn 1 Goose, turn 2 Ashiok, turn 3 Urza, because Goose uses the food and then you have to spend more mana to make another food to keep making mana. So it didn't feel efficient and clean. So I was like, oh, I can go back to Noble Sultai with Noble Hierarch, and someone suggested that here in the YouTube comments, and I was like, that's brilliant. I love that. But as I was testing it a little bit, I came to realize that Noble Hierarch, the green mana requirement for Noble Hierarch just wasn't, I didn't want it enough. I'd rather spend my early turns setting up more powerful plays. So I am only running one green source in the entire deck, one breeding pool. Basic Forest is a liability with Mystic Sanctuary, and doesn't help me cast Archmage's Charm or Cryptic Command, really. So, Basic Forest had to go, Goose left, but I still wanted to cast my green spells. I think they're still very important here, so a single breeding pool is all I have. That with my 4 Astrolabe. So if you look at it, I have 10 fetches, 1 shock, that's 11, 4 Astrolabe. I have 15 green sources, so I think I'm still alright in the green count, although my opponent could Field of Ruin me off of a green source if I don't have an Astrolabe in play. It's possible. But I only run 6 green cards in the entire deck, so it's not like that would be the end of the world either way. So we have these cyclers here, which thin the entire deck a lot with Astrolabe and Bauble, but they also are Moxes under Urza, and Astrolabe also color fixes you because we are pretty heavy in blue, but we do run a lot of black spells, and post board we can side into a lot of green spells too. Mishra's Bauble was one of the hardest cards to play with in this deck if you come from like an Abzan Traverse background, because I used to just like fire off Baubles and I used to use them at cool times, or I used to hold it for a Fatal Push if I knew my opponent had Thought-Knot Seer, like little things like that. But this deck needs them in play even more because you have that Mox effect with Urza, and you have Whir of Invention, which you can kind of convoke or improvise to help give you even more mana there. So sometimes, depending upon the layout of your hand, you don't actually want to spend those Baubles. Like if my curve is turn 1 Push, turn 2 Thopter, turn 3 Whir, turn 4 Urza, then I'm not playing those, and that's what my hand is. I'm not spending my Baubles. I'm gonna let them sit there. So when I play Urza, I have more mana. When I need to Whir, I have more mana. So lots of little things you can do with Bauble, lots of tricks. I can probably do a whole video just on Bauble. I love that card so much. In conjunction with a fetch land, it's a free opt, it's free scry, it's extra information with Thoughtseize effects. This is the best Mishra's Bauble deck I've ever played. I am running 4 Fatal Push right now. My previous list had them all on the sideboard, but I'm seeing more aggro decks now, so I brought them back. I do think maybe 3 main, 1 side might be correct. I'm still playing around with those numbers. I might put this side and a Spellbomb main to try to clean up or move that around a little bit, but there have been very few matchups where Fatal Push hasn't been at least somewhat relevant. Even against Amulet Titan, hitting a Scout is important, and hitting a Dryad is even more important than ever right now. My 1 artifact hate of choice right now, this is my hate section, so I have lands, cantrips, removal, hate cards. So Pithing Needle has been surprisingly relevant. It's not very good against like burn or mono red, but even there I was still able to name like their pain lands, and they couldn't cycle them, and that helped me steal a couple game ones. Obviously I side them out because they're not very good there, but they do have utility in any matchup. Shadow of Doubt has been fantastic, whether it's countering a Summoner's Pact, a Bring to Light, a Scape Shift, a Whir of Invention, a fetch land, a Primetime Trigger. Like there's just so many things, an Expedition map, a Sylvan Scrying. There's so many cards that Shadow of Doubt just stops. It's been just a bad cantrip, I think 3 or 4 times, and I've cast it probably about 15. So I think that's a very high ceiling for it right now, and I highly recommend that card in this meta because of all the things I just mentioned that it hits. It's just very, very good. It's a free main board hate card to help you steal some game ones that you probably don't deserve winning. My threat suite is right here, so I already mentioned the Thopter combo. Urza is just everything you can want in a card. It's a Devoted Druid, a Tarmogoyf, and a Duskwatch Recruiter all in one card. and sometimes it also comes with a Vizier of Remedies. Tireless Tracker is a threat all in and of herself, so already talked to her about her a little bit. I have my Counter Magic Suite, 2 Cryptic Commands and a Deprive combo with the Tracker, and the Mystic Sanctuary to go infinite and infinitely loop your opponent until they mill to death. Archmage's Charm is very useful. Draw 2 cards, counter a spell, or gain control of a permanent with converted mana cost 1 or less. I have stolen mono red's creatures so many times that I think that matchup's actually favored for me. I have Fatal Push to kill their creatures, and I have Archmage's Charm to steal their other prowess creatures. So it's pretty good. The draw, I've frequently done end step, draw 2, play a fetch land, or have a fetch land, crack it after I draw the 2, Mystic Sanctuary, put Archmage's Charm back on top, and still hold up my counter spell on my upkeep. It's just ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous how powerful that is. Right now I'm testing 5 discard spells because I feel like my hands are better when I have a discard spell in them, so I definitely want to utilize that power. So I have 3 Inquisitions and 2 Thoughtseizes because I feel like my burn matchup isn't great, so having just that extra little Inquisition is pretty powerful. The common lists are running, the common list for the blue-black shell is running a 2-2 split. I sideboard the Nihil Spellbomb for the 5th discard spell. Now my sideboard, I have these as counter spells. Ceremonious Rejection because the Eldrazi Tron matchup's pretty bad. It also helps me against Tron. A little bit extra help is not bad there. 2 Ether Gusts are good against Mono Red. They're good against Amulet Titan. They're good against Devoted Druid. You can make an argument for bringing them in against a lot of other decks too. Through the Breach decks, you bring them in. What else do you want those in? Ponza, you can bring that in there as well. 2 Veil of Summers, another advantage of splashing green. Instead of having to run Mystical Dispute, I can run Veil of Summer. They do very similar things, but Veil of Summer is a 1-mana cryptic command in the matchups that it matters, and it's very, very powerful. I can cast an Urza once I have 5 mana up with Veil of Summer backup, and my opponent is probably going to lose the game in that case. 2 Assassin's Trophies, which have been very good when they're good, but sometimes they're not good in the aggro matchups because I have to shock generally to play them. But they're very good against any sort of big creature. They're very good against Planeswalkers, and they're good in the mirror. They're good against Titan decks. Very good against Tron as well. So cool little card. The best removal spell in Modern, and we get to run it in this shell because of the green splash. The problem with it is you give your opponent a free basic land, but we outvalue most decks pretty easily, so giving them an extra land, giving them a little 2-for-1 isn't that big of a deal here. Not as big of a deal as it would be if we were playing like Jund, for example. Battle at the Bridge has been okay. Could be a Collective Brutality. I wanted more life gain to help beat Burn. The largest I've gotten this for so far is X equals 5, and I gained 5 life. That was pretty good. The smallest then at 4 was X equals 2. Then I have Dead of Winter, which is the board wipe. I have to be careful and fetch just basics as long as I can. It's generally on turn 3. I can make it at the very minimum, usually like -2/-2 for all non-snow creatures, which can wipe, like, kill Devoted Druid, kill like Kitchen Finks, and kind of reset the board in my favor. Very good against humans. 2 Ashiok, which are very good against the Mirror, very good against Amulet Titan, and very good against other field decks. Also good against Dredge, because it's a graveyard hate card, in addition to everything else it does. Grafdigger's Cage is for Neoform, Dredge, Collected Company decks. Nihil Spellbomb is in the graveyard hate. Damping Sphere is actually more for spell-based combo than it is for Tron and Amulet. I'll still bring it in those matchups, but it's really just for hit Neoform, Storm, decks like that, which just absolutely can just win the game by itself while I hold up counter magic. Where it still also has utility against Tron and sometimes Amulet. It does damage against Amulet, but I don't think we need Damping Sphere. The matchup's already pretty good. And Damping Sphere doesn't do as much damage to Amulet as it used to. And the last spot is Kalitas, which is a pretty powerful threat against aggro decks. and Dredge. Cletus lets me turn my Fatal Pushes into actual removal spells against Dredge, which is pretty cool. So, this is the deck list. This is the deck tech. Talked about it for a little bit here. Let me know in the comments what you think. I think this deck is absolutely fantastic. I'm glad Sultai is finally working in Modern. I know I've spent enough time working on it. So, thank you for watching, and check out the league.